Thanks, John. It is a privilege to be here. I think was a project that started some months ago, and I had this idea because we see in the universities like this sort of political correctness going on, and it's very hard to be a conservative and a libertarian in a university these days. And I thought it would be important to have a conference of this kind to celebrate the achievements of Western civilization. And the idea was proposed to the university. I didn't get lots of feedback, but that actually excited me all the more. Because if you're not getting all this support, that probably it's because it's a good idea. So I decided to go ahead with this project. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak, I hope that it will be possible to speak in 10 minutes on such a hard topic in terms of its complexity, natural law theory. That's really my favorite topic. I really love this subject. So I brought a paper. It's just a 50-page document. Unfortunately, I will not be able to read the whole thing, but it will be published in the International Trade and Business Law Review. So what's my intention to do is actually to read some passages that I thought could be the most relevant, the more appropriate ones. And of course, then you have the opportunity for questions. And that will help me to clarify some issues if you haven't gotten it very clear. So I'm going to read a small fragment here, and let's see how it goes then. A central discussion in Western jurisprudence is whether a law, in order to be recognized as such, must conform to some permanent or higher standards of justice and morality. Some legal theories have answered this in the affirmative, arguing for the existence of unwritten principles of law that are in some sense superior to the positive law of the state. These unwritten precepts, these jurists have called a higher or natural law, thus propounding the idea that a natural or divine reason to which all those positive laws ought to conform. The acceptance of a higher or natural law raises questions that have been the source of much debate. If there are laws superior to positive law, where do they originate and how they are determined? Numerous competing theories have been advanced in attempt to answer these questions. Some have suggested that the superior law is based upon objective ethical principles, which are accessible to all humans by virtue of their rational capacities. However, others have attributed it to God, in particular, a Christian incarnation of God. The Christian faith has been central to the development of the common law since its conception in 1066. In the first stage of its development, from the 13th century to the 18th century, the common law rested almost entirely upon a religious conception that looked upon a higher law as the basis for judicial decisions. Hence, as the late John Woo pointed out, while the Roman law was a deathbed convert to Christianity, the common law was a cradle Christian. English jurists who were instrumental in the development and refinement of the common law advocated principles of natural law. Amongst these jurists was Sir Henry de Bracton, whose exceptional contributions in the 13th century earned him the title as the father of the common law. Regarded as the first systematic treatment of the common law, Bracton's De Legibus and Consuetudinibus Anglia provided an explanation of the natural law underpinnings of the English legal system. There one will find important statements about the philosophical foundations of this legal system, such as this, and I quote, "The king himself ought not to be under man, but under God, and under the law, because the law makes the king. For there is no king where will, and not law, wields dominion. That as a vicar of God, he, the king, ought to be under the law, is clearly shown by the example of Jesus Christ. For although there lay open to God for the salvation of the human race many ways and means, he used not the force of his power, but the counsel of his justice. Thus he was willing to be under the law, that he might redeem those who were under the law. For he was unwilling to use power, but justice and judgment. 2 centuries later, Bracton's sentiments were fully echoed by John Fortescue, the Chancellor to King Henry VI, who declared that the law of nature springs from God alone, is subject to his law alone, and under him and with him governs the whole world. Hence it comes that all other laws are its servants. Fortescue believed that God has instilled in each of us a proper sense of liberty, individual liberty, defining tyranny as the attempt to replace this condition of liberty by another of servitude that satisfies only the egoistical interests of political rulers. Thus, he quoted from Mark 2:27 to declare that the kings of England are called to rule for the sake of the kingdom, not to the contrary. For law, Fortescue said, is necessarily adjudged cruel if it increases servitude and diminishes freedom, for which human nature always craves. For servitude was introduced by man for vicious purposes, but freedom was instilled into the human nature by God. Hence, freedom taken away from man always desires to return, as is always the case when natural liberty is denied. So, he who does not favor liberty is to be deemed impious and cruel. This natural law tradition of the common law was fiercely advocated by Sir Edward Coke. In the 17th century, he famously angered King James I by stating that even the monarch himself must be bound by the rule of law. This argument was viewed as treasonable by King James, who claimed that as a monarch he personified the law. Even so, Coke remained resolute, thus citing Bracton that the king must not be under man, but under God and the law. According to Lord Denning, one of the most celebrated English judges of the 20th century, those words of Bracton quoted by Coke, that the king is under no man save under God and the law, epitomize in one sentence the great contribution made by common lawyers to the Constitution of England. They, the common lawyers, insisted that the executive power in the law was under the law. In insisting upon this, they were really insisting on the Christian principles of the common law. If we forget these principles, where shall we finish? You have only to look at the totalitarian systems of government to see what happens. The society is primary, not the individual. The citizen exists for the state, not the state for the citizen. The rulers are not under God and the law. They are a law unto themselves. All law, all court are simply part of the state machine. The freedom of the individual, as we know it, no longer exists. It is against that terrible despotism, that overwhelming domination of human life, that Christianity has protested with all its energy at its command. According to a Western legal tradition, liberty presupposes the existence of laws serving as an effective check against arbitrary power. In the constitutional struggle of parliamentary forces against the Stuarts in the 17th century England, the receptive attitude towards Christianity allowed philosophers such as John Locke to develop a political theory where the principal justification for the state rests on the protection of our most fundamental rights to life, liberty, and property.